Hey, I'm going to show you two different ways you can calculate a cumulative or running total, right? So the first way is the easiest way, the quickest way, and the best way if you're not going to make any changes to your data. You're not going to add rows, remove rows. You just want to get that cumulative total in there, right? And the way I'm going to do that is by using the sum function, and let me show you how I use it, right? On the left, I just created a table where I have, a list of savings. So every time I added money to my savings account, I recorded the date and the amount I saved. So let's get started with the sum function. If I type in equals sum, the first argument is really going to be my range. What's the range I want to evaluate? Well, in this case here, my range should stop at B2. So I'm just going to select B2. I'm going to put a colon, and I'm going to have B2 again. So right now my range is B2 to B2, right? And I'm going to close that out, and it should give me a total of 5, which it does. But what I want is, as I drag this down, I want my range to update dynamically. So every time I bring this down another row, I want B2 to stay the same, the initial starting point of my range, but I want my ending point to increase by 1 each time I go down a row. So what I'll do is I'm just going to make B2 an absolute reference by putting a $sign in front of it, and now I'm going to hit enter again. It's not going to change anything on that first row, but now if I drag this down, you'll see that it's giving me a cumulative total. So every time I go down a row, the ending point of my array increases by 1, and that gives me my cumulative total. And I'm just going to double check actually just to make sure. So my cumulative total is 163. Let's just highlight the range over here, and it is 163. Next, I want to show you how to use the lambda function. The lambda function is a function within Excel that allows you to create a custom function, and you can then save that function with a user-friendly name that you can call upon as a function across the entire worksheet, right? So let me just show you how that works. Right, so I'm going to type in equals lambda. Now lambda is looking for either parameters or a calculation. So the parameters would be the values that I want to pass into it, like any other formula function, right? So it could be a cell reference or a value, right? So in this case here, I'm just going to give it a very simple name. I'm going to name my parameter x, right? And I can give it any name I want. I could put my name or anything, and it doesn't need to be quotations, right? So my first parameter is x. My second parameter is going to be y, right? And then what do I want to do with x and y? Well, I want to add them together, right? So I'm going to do x plus y. And I'm going to just close out that bracket. And of note is that the final argument is always interpreted as the calculation within the lambda function. So it's always going to look at that final argument as the calculation. I'm going to hit enter, right? And it's going to give me an error right now because it doesn't know what x and y is, right? But now, what if I want to, actually do the calculation? So in cell D2, I've already put in $5 as my cumulative total, right? So now I'm just going to pass it the arguments, and the way I can pass it arguments is just by putting between brackets after the function what are the arguments I want to give it. So x is going to be really my running total, right? So in this case here, x is only at $5, right? So I'm going to select cell D2, and now what do I want to add to cell D2? Well, I want to add cell B3. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight B3. I'm going to close out that bracket. Now my lambda function actually knows what to do, right? And so if you look, now it's going to give me the cumulative total. I'll just drag that down, right? And now I have my cumulative total, right? And now what's cool about lambda is that I can actually now give it a name so that I can call upon it in the future. So let me just delete what I have over here, and let's create a custom lambda function. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to go into formulas. I'm going to go to define name, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a name like, let's just say running total, right? So now in the formula column here, I'm going to type in equals lambda, and I'm going to give it the same arguments I gave it before. So I'm going to do x, y, x plus y, close that out, and I'm going to hit enter. So now I have a function, I've created a function that's actually called running total. So I'm going to go back into my cell over here, and I'm going to type in equals running total, and you can see now Excel found it as a function. So I'm going to give it that, and so now it's looking for two parameters, x and y. I'm going to give it those same two parameters. So my first parameter is going to be D2, and my second argument is going to be B3. I'm going to close that out, hit enter, and I'm just going to copy that down, and it gives me the same result, right? And so now I'm going to show you why I wanted to give you a quick intro to the Lambda function. You can do a lot more powerful things with Lambda, and you know, there's a lot of great content out there on Lambda. I suggest you take a look at it, but that's Lambda in a nutshell, and that's how we're going to use it in the following function, which is the scan function. All right, so next I'm going to cover the scan function, and you'll soon see why I did a quick overview of what Lambda is. But scan function is really the function that you want to use to do running totals in your worksheets, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click anywhere in my data set here, and I'm going to convert it into a table. On Windows, you hit Control T. On a Mac, it's Command T, and it automatically detected my range with data. I'm going to leave my table has headers selected so it recognizes my column header names, and hit OK. So now it created a table called Table 6. I'm just going to give it a different name. I'm going to call it TBL Savings, right, just to make it a little bit more legible, right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my first cell, which is going to be cell D2, where I want to calculate my running total. So I'm going to type in equals scan. So the first value that it's looking for is, or argument that it's looking for, is the initial value. So what's my starting point? This is actually going to be the x value in my Lambda function. So in this case here, I want it to start at 0, right? Next, I'm going to specify what's the array that I want the scan function to evaluate. I want it to evaluate this whole range over here, right? And you can see it made a reference to my table in the second argument. And now the last argument it's looking for is a function. In this case here, it's going to be the Lambda function, right? And I'm going to type in exactly what I typed in before. So it's going to be, the first argument is going to be, or my first parameter I should say, is going to be x. So x represents the 0 in my scan function, the first argument, right? Y is going to represent the value I have in B2, which is $5, right? And what do I want to do with that? I want to do x plus y. I'm going to close out my Lambda function, and I'm going to close out my scan function, and you're going to see this is going to spill all the way down automatically. And that gives me my running total. And what's nice about this, if I want to add another value, it's going to be automatic. So I could type in July 22nd, 2024. I added another $100, and now I have that cumulative running total. And let's say if I want to remove a row, I'm just going to right click and delete this row. It automatically updates again. So it's versatile. You can use it like that. And what's nice about this is I can actually make it even more powerful, right? So let's get into the next example here I wanted to show you. You'll notice I have a negative entry into my transaction table. There was on July 20th, I took out $10. What if I wanted to omit that from my calculation? I just want to show you how you can make Lambda more powerful and how you can really customize it to suit the calculation you're looking for. So I'm going to start over, and I'm going to type in equals scan, right? And my initial value is going to be 0, right? And my array is going to be my table column with savings, right? And now this time for the Lambda function, I'm going to make it just a little bit more complex. I'm not going to just do a simple, arithmetic x plus y. I'm going to embed an if function in there. So my first two parameters are going to be the same. We're going to have an x parameter, which represents my cumulative value, which at this point is going to start at 0, right? As I referenced in the scan function. Next, we're going to have our y value, which is the value that we want to add to the cumulative value, right? And now, for my actual calculation, I'm going to put in an if statement. So I'm going to type in if right? And in this case here, what I would like to do is if y, which is the value that I'm going to be adding to x, right, my cumulative or my accumulator, right, is less than 0, then I want it to be ignored, right? So if y is smaller than 0, if that is true, then just bring back x, which is my accumulator. However, if that is false, then we can do x plus y. I'm going to close out my lambda or my if function, my lambda function, and now my scan function. Hit enter, and you can see it actually took into account that on July 20th I withdrew $10, and it didn't add that to my cumulative total. One last concept I forgot to mention earlier. Right now you notice in cell D2 I have a $5 total, right? And that makes sense because I only had $5 on that given date. But what if I went into my scan function and I set the initial value, which is currently set to 0, what if I set it to 5? And now I'm going to hit enter. And you'll notice that instead of an initial value of $5, it's now $10. And that's because my initial value of x, which represents my accumulator in the lambda function, is actually now starting at 5. So I just wanted to cover that concept really quick just to give you a better idea. Hey, I hope you found this video helpful. If there's one thing that you should take away from this is that I hope I opened your eyes and that this provided a gateway to more powerful data analysis for you, right? Because there's many different ways you can use that lambda function and run these types of calculations. So thanks a lot for watching, and have a great day.